Hello, my gentle and of course very modern apes. My name is Erica. I'm Gutsit Gibbon, and today what you are fixing to see is a chunk from a big stream that I did, like, I don't know how long it would be when you're watching this video, but to me, it was like last week. Yeah, most of this intro is going to be copied and pasted from the intro of the previous chunk of this stream that I released to you outside of the context of that live stream. It is what it is. I did that stream to raise money for fieldwork that I was going on, and then also that a friend of the channel was going on. And if you're seeing this video, that means I'm currently out doing that fieldwork, and I wanted to have some stuff to release whilst I was absent. These videos are releasing one at a time for 4 weeks to basically cover the month that I'm gone. This is video 2. There's also other videos releasing. I've got like a nice two a week pattern going on. Don't get used to it. But all of that to say that the video you're about to see is an unedited chunk from that stream where me and a bunch of my friends dunk on creationism, and the video that you're watching now is us doing that with regard to radiometric dating. If you want to watch the whole stream, it's like 11 hours long and you can find it like on my channel, but I wanted to release it in digestible chunks, like digestible by this channel standards. Again, these are unedited. I really just wanted to get them out there in smaller pieces, so there's gonna be some banter, there's gonna be some hiccups, but I hope you enjoy it. You can kind of think of it as like something to put on while you're cleaning your house, or your garage, or falling asleep. And while you're engaging in those luxurious activities, you can picture me, currently out in the dirt in West Kenya, scrounging around for cool fossils, genuinely having the time of my life. Thanks to you guys. I'm gonna fix this. For those of you wondering, this is from Answers in Genesis Canada. So we're kind of moving up in production value, as you'll soon see.
Possibly be 44,000-year-old wood inside 45-million-year-old rock. One thing's for certain. At least one of those dating methods wasn't working. And of course,
they both blow your idea out of the water. Who cares if it's 44,000 or whatever? It's still orders of magnitude older than you think the entire planet is, my guy.
Baby, we're hitting up polystrate fossils, and I couldn't be happier.
I'm sorry. It's just he starts out arranging deck chairs on the Titanic, and it's like, dude, what are you doing?
Dude, this is Calvin Smith, so we're gonna be putting up deck chairs on the Titanic. Right. This is like his.
I'm gonna go get myself another.
Also, Erica, do you think there's a definite jab in there, even calling it evolutionary dating methods rather than the honest truth about how broad those dating methods are and where they actually come from?
No, dude, that's what John was saying just a minute ago. Like, John was like, what is an evolutionary dating method?
Yeah, that's sus.
Listen, you gotta feed that us versus them mentality, man. You gotta see
an evolutionary dating method is when you get rejected, you learn from your mistakes, and you try again.
There you go. There
you evolve to be a better person, more attentive, whatever it takes.
Population level, right? Like when populations learn to do that, that's just sexual selection. That's what we're really talking about.
Yep.
All right.
Okay, so one of these must be wrong.
The dating game. It has some real problems these days. No, gentlemen, I'm not talking about the fact that apparently most women swipe left 90% of the time. Or that, ladies, many men have chosen to get passports and run off to foreign countries to find traditional women.
Dude, are we getting culture war shit in this?
Yes, we are. Yes,
I'm sorry,
absolutely.
Which demographic are we courting again? I'm lost now.
No way! Oh, man. You know who's
I gotta admit, I did not expect that.
It did come out of nowhere. But you know what, though? I think a lot of times, I have a secret theory that especially the religious side of this whole thing is they're very edgy. Like, they really want to talk about edgy topics, and so they use any opportunity to get it in there, and so he couldn't resist.
Well, and I love the presentation here where it's like the women are swiping left and the men are looking for traditional women. So, ladies, if you want to hope to get a man in this day and age, you better get your ass in the kitchen.
And stop chasing them to Brazil, really.
Yeah, just stop. Yeah, don't chase them. They want a hottie that they think is going to have their traditional values. And we'll see. All right, that was shocking. But
instead of dealing with Western feminism, no, I'm talking about
the. Wow. Tell us how you really feel.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Erica, what the hell did you find?
Look, we all know that ultimately giving women the vote was the start of the downfall of Western civilization.
I love how smug he says it too. He's like, instead of the Western feminism that is turning all our young lads into incels who travel abroad. Like, come on.
Is there an Eastern feminism I should be learning about?
For real.
Okay.
But the other thing it does kind of bring up is we're not even 45 seconds into this video, and already you can't shake the fact that this is the connection to the right-wing politics. They can't just even do pseudoscience. They have to let you know how important their particular pseudoscience is to the ideology where they're fighting against in the culture war. Yeah,
I blame Jay for this. I do, because Jay, every time you and I are on a stream together, it's about like misogyny, anti-trans stuff, racism, like every time.
This means I can still come to the cookout. I'm not gonna.
Well, it's similar to what I was saying earlier, where like
there's a certain pattern here.
Yeah, it's similar to what I was saying earlier, where I was talking about how the point of a lot of this is that they're just trying to defend things that they feel are core beliefs, that they don't really, the evidence isn't the main thing. It's that you're attacking their core belief. And part of that is the 6,000-year-old Earth and the rejection of common descent. But an equally big part of it is things like homophobia, transphobia, misogyny. Those are also all core identity markers. They wouldn't put it that way, but it's what it comes down to. And I think that's why we see this strong connection. It's why Answers News always jumps from like, so we don't think this jellyfish means anything for evolution. And then also this teacher was fired for teaching kids that trans people are evil.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So Erica, you said earlier that they lost the court cases about, you know, what you can teach in public schools and all this. But they didn't go away, right? They went to the net and social media and all this stuff. And I'm actually get frustrated with the scientist side of things, the fact that I feel like we're not, as scientists, as researchers, as educators, we've kind of gone away. Like, we think this isn't anything to fight. And it's not just that they've continued to fight in these other realms, but now they're literally using it as the foundation to fascism. And so I try to like not make everything about that, but that is a huge part of my motivation of fighting creationists, is because of how central their creationist dogma is to their power grab.
Well, we always talk here on the channel. Well, this, like, a lot of us talk together about this concept where it's like creationism is not in and of itself, outside of just being, you know, incorrect. It's not necessarily like harmful in the same sense that like being anti-vax or being anti-climate change or being homophobic or whatever it is.
Right.
But it acts as this incredible like gateway conspiracy theory that, you know, like, for instance, most flat earthers are creationists, but not all creationists are flat earthers. It's a very interesting through line that seems to be causing a lot of problems. And Ken Ham has seen the writing on the wall. Joel Duff, who's not here, but you know, he does a lot of like the tracking what AIG is up to, and the switch to mostly culture war stuff is imminent, right? It's already creeping. It's already on the doorstep. And sometimes I wonder if that's not what it was always about, right? Like, it's not so much about the young earth creationism, but what the young earth creationism kind of stands for.
I can guarantee that's what it was always about.
Always about that. Like, that was, I remember that in the 90s, in their regular broadcasts, their blogs, their books and everything, like that was kind of the core thing here. It just wasn't, I don't know, as transparent perhaps because the issues have changed, or they weren't as explicit of what issues they were really afraid of they wanted to keep you from. But the implication was, if you go down this path of accepting this tenet in science or that one, then you're going to end up accepting this amoral position.
Yeah, and that's not even just the 90s, right? Like, I have read creationist literature going all the way back into the 70s.
Yeah.
And it was always the core thing that when you get down to what is their motivation, because they talk about their motivations, not always in the main text, but in introductions and forwards and whatnot. It's always this idea that we need to call the nation back to God. And part of that is to convince them that the godless atheists have led them astray. Because ultimately,
there's a really strong authoritarian bent in the idea that, like, you know, we need to bow to the authority of the church, and with respect to young earth creationism, and therefore, by the same token, we need to bow to the authority of the church with respect to the subservience of women, and with respect to Christian nationalism kind of views, and all those sorts of things. And these things are kind of tied together. The whole idea of the authority of God is sort of central to all of them.
Yeah, and also just some of them are actually creation narratives. So if we look at like their issues with gender, we can identify what we call gender essentialism, right? And a lot of that is their rhetoric of he created them male and female is the essence of that idea. And whereas as scientists, we understand that there's variation and that that's not true, that the variation of the species sort of is the essence of the species. And so there's a lot of other, I call them creation myths, that are like wrapped up in sort of their thinking. Even I think some of the issues we have with like climate change, right, is their belief that God created this universe, so therefore he has dominion over all of it, therefore this is all happening according to his plan. Like, I think we do focus on young earth creationism, but something like I teach my students is that there's a lot of other creation myths that go along with sort of biblical literalism, and they all pop their heads up in problematic places.
Well, and here's the crux of it, right? Like, I think this is why Ken Ham glommed on, and I pick Ken Ham, pick any of these guys that are young earth creationists, like Hellman, whatever. But they recognize that the world is changing, and it's changing in a way that they don't like. And it's changing in ways that they don't like, that they feel like they can use, in part, the Bible to defend. Whether they can or can't is another story, but they feel like they can. And so it's not convincing to anybody to be like, well, my belief system says XYZ, so you should follow it, which is why they turn to young earth creationism, because it's like, oh, if you can show that the earth is young, well, then you might end up convincing them that the rest of the text is correct. It's like a nice flagship that they can attach absolutely everything to. If they can convince you of that, and Ken Ham says the opposite all the time. He says, if they can convince you that the earth is actually old and that evolution actually happened, you've lost them, right? Like, you've lost the kids. They've got you in their hooks. When in reality, I think he's sort of manufactured the young earth creationism bent to attach everything else, because he knows if he can convince you of young earth creationism, then he can also convince you that what the Bible, or his interpretation of what the Bible says about gay people or women or whatever, you can also smuggle that in, which is alarming and sick. And it's very telling. Yeah, I keep saying this because it's like fresh in my mind. But like, I just got done reading Origin finally, and like when he's giving the historical sketch at the beginning about like where everybody else is at, there isn't a single young earth creationist, not one that he talks about. They're all old earthers. They're all like proponents of maybe some level of species fixity, but also some level of evolution. Creationism looked nothing like it looks like today. In the 1850s. It just didn't. Wow. It was a completely different animal. And, I think that's why creationism had a resurgence, like right around the turn of the century, when people were starting to have a lot more rights and things were changing in a way that they didn't like.
I mean, I brought it up earlier in the stream, how, some of my role models in paleontology are devout Christians.
Yeah.
Like, almost all of the earliest geologists and paleontologists and biologists were super devout Christians, but even though they were what we would now call old earth creationists, they acknowledged that natural processes occurred and leave evidence behind.
Well, and they were scholars of the natural world, like they were like, okay, the natural world should be intelligible. God isn't going to make it unintelligible. Therefore, it's worth studying to learn more about creation. And they came to these conclusions, like, not in spite of the Bible, right? They harmonized them as they went. And that's again why, like, the creationism has to be tied to the social stuff, because Christians made it work for so long, and it was fine. And many Christians still make it work today. Religious folks of all stripes make it work today, and they're totally chill.
Right. Let's see. Trying to remember names here because I'm horrific with names, but Charles Lyell, I believe he wrote one of the books that Darwin.
Yeah, Principles of
that
Geology.
made Darwin think. Yeah, Principles of Geology. Again, old Earth creationist. He thought the flood occurred, but he couldn't find any record of it in the rocks. So he reconciled it with his faith, saying, "Oh, the flood happened. It was just gentle enough not to harm the rocks or wash anything away."
Or it was local or something. I can't remember what he eventually settled on. But anyways, okay, we go on this topic forever. We're gonna do
Let's go.
I'm gonna let it play, and then I'm gonna get a drink here in a second. Once
dating methods that you often hear referenced in support of the story of evolution that have supposedly disproven the biblical timeline. Now, biblical creationists have long pointed out the many problems with the unprovable assumptions behind these techniques, like carbon-14 and other radioisotope dating methods, which were actually developed long after the idea of millions of years had been accepted as fact by evolutionists, primarily because of the rock layers seen around the world. And of course, we've dealt with the many problems concerning their interpretation of those rock layers before. However, despite what the average person thinks about these methods because of the way they're often presented, expert geologists and archaeologists that believe in long ages and understand the limitations of those methods.
Want to become an amazing content creator?
Mute. Sorry, guys. I always get the motion array ones.
On them exclusively as a way of supposedly determining the age of something. And how can you know that? Well, here are a couple of quotations, one from a book on Egyptian archaeology, another from an associate professor of geology, and then a quote from a general book on geology, respectively, that should help put this in perspective. If a C14 date supports our theories, we put it in the main text. If it does not entirely contradict them, we put it in a footnote. And if it's completely out of date, we just drop it.
Joe, you want to... John, God, I'm already drunk. John, you want to tackle that while I go?
Yeah, can you back up a second so it's visible?
Yeah. We know so many J names. Okay, got it? Wait, what? Oh, there it is.
That's right. It's right. You're good.
Okay, be right back.
It's kind of weird. One common theme is whenever they talk about radiometric dating, they always go back to very old sources. And almost never will they, deal with recent research or the preponderance of radiometric data that we have out there. So this is kind of strange, just to go back to, like, why would you even quote this book? What does that have to do with? He's saying if it supports our theories, we'll put it in a main text. If it does not entirely contradict it, we put in a footnote. If it's completely out of date, we just drop it. That's not true. If you do that as written, then that's essentially fraud, academic fraud, and sometimes
I remember seeing something about this, and somebody else who's more educated in the area can jump in if they like, but like, this is being taken entirely out of context, and it's kind of a jab at archaeologists. I think it was specifically, and it was like saying there are people who do this and we should not do it, and it was a critique on, like, on some contemporaries of his who had this tendency, and he was taking a jab at them. It wasn't like an admission
that sounds
all.
a lot more plausible. We're writing a paper now that has we have a series of ages, and most of them work well within the interpretive framework, and then we have a couple that don't, and we absolutely will include all of those ages in the data table, so even the handful of results that didn't work well, or they just have very big error bars or some other reason that we have them there. But they're always reported. You always know about them, and you have the original data so that you can calculate that age by yourself. I should point out that when you report ages for whatever kind of study, you wouldn't just say my radiocarbon age is 10,000 years plus or minus this. You should put, in addition to all the method, like the sample weights and description, the isotopic ratios of 14C, of 13C, and everything else that you can, along with the uncertainties. Like you have to do that so that anybody could recalculate that age from scratch if they needed to. And so this is just wrong. This, I mean, it's not how anybody does it. And if they do, then they shouldn't.
So I think, yeah, I think that there's some interesting bits here too. Like carbon-14 is notorious for being easy to contaminate as well as compared to a lot of other methods that we tend to use, like argon or uranium lead or whatever. And that's just because of like cosmic rays. They bombard the sample, and this is why it's very difficult to get truly zero carbon in anything. So I don't think it's surprising. Oh, sorry, you go ahead.
Oh, no, that's fine. Yeah, radiocarbon is tough to work with because carbon is everywhere. That's it. Like there's carbon in the atmosphere. I mean, and for that same reason, to be honest, argon is difficult to work with because argon is a minor constituent of our atmosphere, and lead is difficult to work with because environmentally lead is everywhere too. So, I mean, the first attempts to do like uranium lead dating were foiled by the fact that we had a lot more environmental lead than we thought we did, right? So all of these methods have that issue, but carbon, like if you're doing radiocarbon dating today, it's very uncommon that you would get ages that are completely nonsense or contaminated like this. Like it's pretty advanced to the point where now we can do laser ablation radiocarbon measurements, right? Where you instead of taking like grams of sample and then burning in a furnace down to graphite and then measuring the graphite, like that's what it was decades ago. Now we're at the point where you can take a microscopic sample and then using a laser spot that's only, you know, tens of microns wide, get a radiocarbon age here and then here and then here. So you have like multiple radiocarbon ages per second on a single sample, and you could measure the age from one side to the other. And using those techniques, you can get rid of issues with contamination for the most part.
That's really cool. And sorry, you finished,
no,
and then I have something I want to. Okay, I'd have to find the link again, but I remember reading. I think it was a graduate thesis that did carbon dating on some samples from Pompei.
Oh yeah. This is a Vesuvius paper with argon. I know the exact one you're talking
about. No, not that one. This is different. This one did carbon dating on exposed charcoal samples, like samples that had been exposed to the volcanic gases. And it reported on, hey, these ages are inflated. They're not correct. And then here's why. Like it was a thesis, or maybe not a thesis, but a paper checking on like the things that can alter radiometric dates. And then there was a follow-up paper. I don't know if it was by the same authors, but they did carbon dating on an olive oil flask that had been protected from the volcanic gases and got an exact carbon age.
So here's what's interesting about that too, right? Is that, and you know, John and I have been doing some stuff behind the scenes on this ICC paper that came out a while back that was testing the corroborative accuracy between different radiometric methods. And I was surprised by how well it performed, given they were doing their data set was from 2003, and most of what they were using was from what was it, John? It was like the U.S. Geological Survey or something.
Yeah, it's a USGS database of radiometric data, but only what USGS has analyzed. Like that's what goes in. It's so like
USGS is the one. They're the ones who sign my shield checks.
Oh, of course, yeah, big geology.
I wish. I wish. Please, someone pay me.
My Soros check from hiding the Smithsonian giants too has not yet come in the mail. So, but no, I mean, like you've got these methods, right, that are completely independent from one another. Like even within radiometric dating, you know, carbon, like your example there with carbon-14 at Pompei is a phenomenal example, because they did also date Pompei using argon methods on the Mount Vesuvius, the ash from Mount Vesuvius, right? Like like tephra is that tephra?
Yeah.
Whatever. The ash from Mount Vesuvius. Yeah, they date the ash from Mount Vesuvius. and they home in on the calendar year as counted up by historical records. It doesn't get more accurate than that. These guys are begging for examples. They say to us, they're like, how come when you know the date of the rock, you don't get the known date? As you were talking earlier, John, with the Steve Austin stuff, right? I'm so sorry. We do get the calendar year when these methods are actually performed properly, when you're actually managing your error bars correctly, when you're doing all of this as it should be done, you get these crystal clear ages, and they corroborate one another too. The fact that that carbon date for that oil flask got the year for that you got the year of the eruption for that carbon flask, and then for the carbon dating of the oil flask, and then you also got the same date for the argon and Mount Vesuvius, or like even within the ballpark, because I'm assuming the date that the oil was actually made is going to be a little bit earlier than when the eruption happened. That shouldn't happen if radiometric dating doesn't work, unless God is speeding everything up in lockstep to confuse people. Nor should those two methods corroborate the drifting of the continents, or the ice core dating, or dendrochronology, or any of it. None of that should work. Least of all corroborate one another.
And I found the papers I was talking about just to make sure. I found the papers I was talking about just to make sure I was representing them correctly. Yeah, it was exposed mortars, like from mortar and pestles.
Okay, got it.
Those dates were super overshot, 20 to 30,000 years. The olive oil the olive oil dated to the exact year.
This is what I'm saying, right? Like, none of that should happen if radiometric dating isn't reliable.
I just want to say from sort of just like a general academic perspective, like John brought up this really good point about not engaging the current science and the current literature. We see this across the board with creationists, but also it bothers me that it feels like they're digging through so much stuff and they're ignoring all the evidence, they're ignoring all the actual data presented, and they're looking for these little gotcha quotes that look like a processual problem. Oh, look, there's this one scientist who wrote a book and he confessed that this whole endeavor is bunk, and then then it's all a house of cards, right? Then everything should fall apart from there. And it's just a really, it shows sort of, they're not lazy necessarily. It shows a lot of effort that goes into misrepresenting a field. That's like what I want to say about that.
Malicious behavior, maybe?
A lot of malicious behavior, yeah.
They do it, I mean, I always love to bring it back to hominins, but they do it all the time with hominins, right? Like there have been cases when, like, especially in contested bones, my audience will know that the contested bone situation is dire, but they'll have a picture on there, and it's got a inferior view of Ardipithecus ramidus, and they're like, oh, they talk about, the evolutionists talk about how this thing was upright, but it doesn't even preserve the foramen magnum, and the picture has the foramen magnum preserved, right? Like, where does this kind of thing come from? A lot of it, I think, is because they're tackling subjects that they don't have a formal education in, with the sole purpose of misrepresenting it, or at least a laissez-faire attitude towards properly representing it.
Or they use big word use big word confuse people.
Well, the genetics, that is the absolute characteristic whenever they talk about genetics. If I have to hear created heterozygosity one more time, I'm going to walk into traffic. Like, it's insane. So, all right, I'm going to let him continue. Let's hear these other quotes.
We put it in a footnote. And if it's completely out of date, we just drop it. In general, dates in the correct ballpark are assumed to be correct and are published. But those in disagreement with other data are seldom published, nor are the discrepancies fully explained. If the laboratory results contradict the field evidence, the geologist assumes that there's something wrong with the machine date. To put it another way, good dates are those that agree with the field data, fossils in the strata. Now, when you think about it, it's extremely obvious from just these three examples that in many cases, radiometric dating isn't the primary method being used to determine the age of whatever sample is being tested.
John, is that true? Is that true?
I mean, I would just challenge him and anybody else, like, to find this an example of a real study.
like anywhere.
Instead of taking a quote from a book that may or may not be applicable, like just pick any paper where we're determining the age of something. And I mean, to be completely fair, he says that he gives this idea that like, okay, a good date is one that agrees with the other data. If there's a bad date, then we set it aside, or we have to explain it as a discrepancy. Like that's not entirely true, but think of what he's saying. If A contradicts with these other lines of evidence as B and C, then we might be more suspicious of A because we have higher confidence in B and C. So that's how we actually conflicting evidence, right? We develop a hypothesis by which to test this. So like, the next step would be, I have a radiometric date that I thought this age was going to be from the Cretaceous, but actually it's older than that. So there's some conflict here. So you set up a hypothesis, one, that your radiometric age is wrong, and two, that your whatever other lines of evidence are wrong, and then you find a way to test it. We can do that with the radiometric ages simply by replicating the result using different methods, or double checking the systematics of the method, which a lot of people, to be honest, don't know how to do, and including ones that use radiometric ages, not just like archaeologists per se, but like geologists too. Not everybody who uses and reports radiometric ages are actually an expert in the process. So but there are ways to go back there and just test the validity of the age. That has it's not as simple as like we set it aside because we like the results here and we don't. I mean, objectively we can do this through hypothesis testing, right? And so just look at any real study, and I'll guarantee you're going to find time and again, if you're talking about geological materials, then yes, the radiometric age is going to be the primary way by which you determine the age of those materials. Like that's absolutely true. Just look up the book, The Geologic Timescale, in any university library, and you can read through those hundreds and hundreds of pages of how we determine the boundaries of the Mesozoic and every geologic era and period and stage and so forth, right?
So I got to ask you a quick question, and then I have a punchline here, John. So let me ask you, how much do you think our radiometric dating methods have advanced since like the 70s?
Since the 1970s, actually, the methods and techniques, almost all of them are already there in the 70s, including a lot of ones that we use today. Technology-wise, like the sensitivity of the detector cups, like the resistance in those, which, I mean, that has increased, orders of magnitude. The vacuum pumps that we need to keep contaminants out, and the ways that we turn a sample into ionized materials that can be like moved through a vacuum line and sent around a magnet. Like this is huge advancements in that technology. And so like the precision is much, much better. We can work with much smaller samples. Like, in the 70s, you might need grams of material, like I said, if you want a radiocarbon date, if you want a potassium argon date, I mean, grams of sample. Whereas today, you just imagine a circle that is 20 microns in diameter and about 5 to 10 microns thick, right? That's how much material you need sometimes to get a radiometric age.
So with that in mind, right, like I think it would be, from what you said, I don't think it's unreasonable to say that the methods have remained consistent, but their precision and accuracy have increased. Thanks to advancements in technology. So I think that's important because I started backing through this, and here are the dates for these quotes. This one that you can currently see on screen is from 1970. This one that you can now see on screen is from 1977. And the third and final one is from 1972. So all three of these quotes that Calvin Smith has presented are almost 50 years out of date. I have a hard time believing that those quotes were gathered because of their applicability to modern methods.
Yeah. To give you just a brief example, I was just going to say, to give a brief example, go back to like the 1970s. At that point, looking at recent history, we have the Greenland ice core, which becomes kind of a golden standard for measuring time against, right? Because we have this thick ice sheet where we can the Greenland ice sheet records about 130,000 years of history. The Antarctic ice sheet, more than that, about 800,000 years plus now. But Greenland is kind of like this metric we compare it against. And the nice thing about that is we can count at least back 20, 30,000 years, count the individual layers and say that's the age of this layer, and here we've got 8,000 layers down. We've got some climatic anomaly that we can see elsewhere. So that's the age of it. And here we've got this volcanic ash that appears that may be correlated to other volcanic eruptions around the world. But that was kind of the standard where we could count the layers. Now that's not the case. Within the last 7-8 years, now we use radiometric dating because it's more precise than the Greenland ice core chronology, right? More precise than actually counting one by one the layers, because there is an error and uncertainty that's associated with counting those layers. So, now we go back 10,000 years, the error could be plus or minus 20 or 30 years on radiometric dates.
If I may, so this is just going to be kind of a re-emphasizing of the point that Erica just made, but I'm doing this specifically so that we can quote you later when somebody throws these back in our face. So, sir, specifically with respect to the quote from the Proceedings of the Symposium on Radiocarbon Variations and Absolute Chronology held in Uppsala in 1969, there was a quote where somebody reported that somebody else said, so it's hearsay, but they said, if a C14 date supports our theories, we put it in the main text. If it does not entirely contradict them, we put it in a footnote. And if it is completely out of date, we just drop it. Few archaeologists who concern themselves with absolute chronology are innocent of having sometimes applied this method. And that was specifically with respect to dating archaeological finds in the Nile Valley. Now, as Ms. Gibbons just asked you, I understand that radiometric dating techniques have advanced significantly since then. Is that correct?
There's more to this story, I think. Because this deals mainly with archaeological finds, there were quite a few conflicts in the mid to late 20th century between radiocarbon dating, which was the standard for archaeological materials, because they all happen to be, several thousands of years old or hundreds at youngest, right? So there were conflicts because we had histories that we knew from archaeology, from written histories or not, that we thought were very precise, like the Egyptian chronologies. And then we had radiometric ages from radiocarbon coming in that disagreed with those chronologies, right? There was a disagreement, and that was quite common throughout the 20th century, because one of the components you need for radiocarbon dating is the original amount of radiocarbon in the sample, right? And we estimate that to be close to the atmospheric value at the time, but we know that the atmospheric value varies over time. We didn't know at the time just how much it varied. So by like the end of the 90s, especially going to early 2000s, we come up with a calibration curve where we radiocarbon date stuff of known material going back every year, more or less, for 50,000 years. And that tells us how much radiocarbon content in the atmosphere has changed over time, and that allowed a calibration to come into point. So a 10,000 year radiocarbon age in the 70s would be, you'd think it's 10,000 years old. We now know that 10,000 years radiocarbon years corresponds to about 11,500 actual years, right? So that age would be off by over 1,500 years. Something that was 2,000 years old by radiocarbon dating, it turns out it was actually, it could be 2,200 years or 2,100 years, something like that. So it's going to be off. Now,
so our calibration methods have improved considerably. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay, and our materials and methods have improved considerably in that intervening 50 years as well. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. And so would it be fair to say, that's exactly what I'm doing. Would it be fair to say, sir, that the problems that, if they were experienced at all, the problems which were experienced by archaeologists with respect to radiocarbon dates in the 1960s would not be experienced if those same archaeologists were to use current methods to test those self-same examples today?
Most likely they would not be, no.
Okay. And you can say that based on your expert experience in the field. Is that right?
Not just mine, but quite a collective experience in the field.
But at least yours.
My colleagues and yes.
Okay. And you have a PhD in the subject.
I do, as do my colleagues, including some who work in these labs that would date those materials. And
from an accredited university.
Yes, quite some very big ones.
Thank you, sir.
So not Patriot Bible University then?
Yeah, so next time that comes up, we can quote this conversation and say that we spoke with an expert specifically with
Mr. Anderson, link it.
Now, pardon me. Now, pardon me, sir. I'm just a little scientist from the backwoods. Could I ask you about some carbon?
It's more, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna let this guy continue. Let's hear some more of this.
I'm sorry,
I actually did want to ask John something really quick.
Oh yeah, shoot.
If that's okay.
Go nuts.
So let's say you're doing carbon dating. What is the smallest proportion of C14 to C13? Like, what's the smallest proportion that you would consider a reading in the machine? Like, what the smallest amount you would consider to be possibly accurate?
Yeah, that's a good question. And there's no single answer for this, which unfortunately creationists misrepresent. They kind of imagine that there's a single value that is the background value on all instrumentation. And so anything above that must be accurate. And that's just not true. It varies from one sample to another. Like if you have a diamond sample, it's one value. If you have a coal sample, it's a different value. And we use those for reference standards, by the way. If you have bone material, it's one thing. If you have plant material, it's another thing. And if you have carbonates, it's different. So what we always do is measure some material that's the same material chemically as what you are trying to date. But on this one, we have an independent constraint on its age. Right? We either know it's really old for one reason or another. We know exactly how old it is. And from that, we can calculate what that minimum would be. Usually, I just calculated this the other day, so I'll probably remember this number wrong, but it's 0.0001 of the modern carbon value. Comes out to be about 55,000 years for a lot of types of samples, especially if like carbonates or plant material. Around 55,000 is the background reading that you're going to get if you have that in an AMS.
Okay, so just as a non-specific, just general floor, maybe like 10 to the -4th or 10 to the -5th is the most you would trust?
Yeah, I don't even want to put the number because I should calculate it again really quick, which I can do. But yeah, let me do that while we listen.
I'm just trying to rule out that you probably wouldn't consider 10 to the -12 a reading in a radiocarbon context. No?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, T-Rock thinks that you should incorporate that, so you're wrong.
Oh no.
Oh my God, no, John, T-Rock. T-Rock is the expert. What are you to do?
I have bashed my head against that brick wall so many times trying to get him to understand.
All right, I have an actual important question before you resume the tape.
All right.
What are you drinking?
What am I drinking?
Yes.
Dude, I'm always drinking White Claw. There's no laws on the claws.
Oh, all right. We got White Claw. We got some Wicked Apple. I'm drinking water, so I need to set my game up. But
dude, I was on water all day. But you gotta switch it up. I'm preparing. I'm just
some hard iced tea.
Yeah, I'm trying this for the first time. It's honestly not bad. I'm a big fan of ales.
I'm a tried and true claw drinker. They're just so easy to drink. I like them. I like Blue Moon. I'll drink beers, but I'm just I'm a basic bitch, if you will.
Nothing wrong with that. All right, let's go.
Let's do it.
From just these three examples, that in many cases, radiometric dating isn't the primary method being used to determine the age of whatever sample is being tested. For example, in the first case, we see the statement, if a C14 date supports our theories. And then the quotation proceeds to describe whether the date was correct, compatible, or corrupt. And from there, they either put it in the main text, footnote it, or drop it completely. Which means they must have already determined how old they think it is, and the radiometric date won't dissuade them. Otherwise, they wouldn't have known whether the date was good, bad, or ugly, so to speak, to begin with, as they wouldn't have had anything to compare the calculated dates to. This type of choose your own adventure.
Elaborate, John.
No, we never do that. That's just wrong. And I mean, sometimes we do have an idea of how old the sample is for independent reasons. But, for one, if we measure it, then we put it in the table of results. If it doesn't agree with, what we think the age is, then we explain why. We have to explain why. And if you don't, then you don't pass review, at least not in a decent journal. So it's just flat out wrong in practice. And again, find a study that where any of what he says is true.
John,
this quote from 1972 is not applicable to the work that you are currently doing in 2024. That's crazy to me.
I just want to bring up something too that I believe to be true in all fields, because part of what he's trying to depict is they have the answer made up ahead of time based on other stuff, and if they do their stuff correctly and they use the correct techniques and they come to a different answer, they're gonna not report that and reject that. When in actuality, isn't that how we win awards and get grants, is when we figure out that everybody else was wrong and we can prove it, and we just did a test that suggests all those other dates are wrong, and go ahead, do the test again, you'll see the same thing. Right? Like, when you want that, isn't that how you make your career, become the famous type of scientist everybody thinks we want to be? It's just crazy that they think that science works on everybody come to a consensus and nobody challenge it.
That's how you, like, when you're writing a grant, like I'm doing my NSF proposal now. I'm finishing my NSF proposal, fingers crossed. But you're having to present this pilot data. Well, at least in my case, I'm presenting this pilot data that I'm basically saying, hey, this assumption that we've had for a really long time might not be warranted. It deserves a systematic look-see to see if the assumption is warranted or if it's not. That's the kind of stuff that gets funded, right? I mean, not as much as that I'm totally overturning everything.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, we have to have reason to believe the things that we believe. And that's the kind of stuff that people just throw money at. When you're proposing that you're about to change the paradigm, if you've got the chops to back it up, people are into it.
Now, how about this? And by the way, stop me if I'm kind of doing this and it's annoying, but so to the scientists on the panel, if you're funded by, say, the NSF or somebody like that, and one of your pieces of information, one of your data is anomalous, are you allowed to discard it and ignore it?
No. I mean, my understanding is that if the NSF is funding you, you're reporting what you get in the project, right? Like you're setting out with a specific research question, you're collecting all this data that is surrounding that research question. And in that proposal, you're saying, okay, here's the data that I'm going to collect. Here are the tests that I'm running. If the tests give me A, I reject the hypothesis. If the tests give me B, I accept the hypothesis and move forward. Like, it's laid out point by point, step by step. That's what gets submitted. That's how it ends up being funded. Now, obviously, life is a thing. And when they fund you, you might end up not getting to collect certain data. Like, I've known people who set out to collect like behavioral ecology data in Madagascar, and then Madagascar had a civil war, so they can't go collect their data. Like, stuff happens, you know?
Yeah. But you have to explain the anomalies. You can't ignore the anomalies. Is that fair?
Yeah. I mean, I've never even, I couldn't even conceive of that.
Yeah. You wouldn't just discard the anomalies, would you?
No, not unless, the only time I can think of if you would like discard the anomalies would be like if your equipment was literally broken or something.
Mm-hmm. Like, even then, you probably an anomaly in your data set. If you find an anomaly in your data set, and granted, I don't have any official publications, but I've done quite a bit of lab work. If you have an anomaly, you want to investigate that. That's interesting.
It's fun.
So if you find an anomaly,
you ask for more funding so you can investigate.
Yeah, certainly. If you find an anomaly, if it doesn't fit what you're going to expect, you're going to question it. and you might go back and double check it. You might sample more around that area.
Brother, that's what's going to get repeat funding.
Yeah.
That's what's going to get your funding.
And
if
that's how new discoveries are made.
Yeah, and even if it's not funded, I mean, even if you're working with students in a class on a group project, you're going to teach your students how to handle their data ethically. And part of that is handling outliers and rare data points. And I don't think anybody would teach them that it's okay to just disregard a data point because it's outside of your expectations.
Well, then why is it that this guy is saying that that's exactly what you guys always do?
That's what we're saying. Yeah, he's misrepresenting. And you got to be honest. That's a big part of the frustration, is that they can't even represent the process fairly. I mean, I've even asked the question of how much charitable listening do you owe these people, because they're twisting and contorting everything that's given to them. It's very problematic.
Mm.
I mean, it's one of
just as someone who does paleontology and geology, listening to creationists talk about my field is like listening to a mechanic tell you to pour sugar in your gas tank. They have no idea what's going on. And if you follow what they say, you're not going to get anywhere.
It's excruciating. If we happen to get to it later, there's a video that I have on the docket on whale evolution. It's basically Donnie having a bunch of people on to talk about whale evolution and then talking a little bit about it himself. And he very confidently in discussing Indohyus, which is proposed to be one of these very, early cetaceans, he goes, they classify, and Dapper, if you're still here, you're going to love this.
Oh, I am.
He goes, they classify Indohyus as an artiodactyl, not a cetacean. And you're just like, you can pull up the Wikipedia article for any cetacean that is alive today, and you will see that they nest within the artiodactyls. The Indohyus is an artiodactyl, and it's also a cetacean, just like Pachycetus, just like Ambulocetus, just like Rhodocetus and Dorodon, and so on and so forth, all down to modern cetaceans, because they have all of the characteristics that define an artiodactyl genetically and morphologically. But you can't expect these people, you should expect them, but I don't think that's reasonable at this point, to do the barest minimum, but they don't, because they don't care. Calvin Smith here, he is not trying, this video was not created as an attempt to inform people. It was created as an attempt to convince them.
Yeah. And by the way, guys, cetaceans are a subgroup of artiodactyls. Now, we didn't always know that. And so they were traditionally given the same taxonomic rank, Artiodactyla versus Cetacea. But we found that that's wrong. And this cool thing that science does is when it finds out the previous conclusions were wrong and no longer are supported by the current evidence, science has this thing where it changes the conclusions that it has come to in order to bring itself in line with current data. And saying this is classified as an artiodactyl as if that doesn't include cetaceans is just as dumb as saying, oh, this is classified as a butterfly, not an insect.
Well, I'm curious, do you know how we discovered that at least some fossil whale, well, now we know all of them, but do you know how we discovered that a fossil whale had an involucrum, with Basilosaurus in particular?
I mean, I don't know the exact story of discovering the involucrum of Basilosaurus in particular, no.
Someone dropped the skull on the floor.
Oh, okay. Out. Yeah.
Wonderful.
I mean, look, sometimes accidents advance science. Lots of inventions have been discovered because someone screwed up.
So remind me, I'm going to bring something up later that is in this vein. Remind me, but I want to get through this. I want to get a little bit more through this video. So I'm going to hit play.
Reporting isn't science in its truest form. It's actually just cherry picking your data. Now, despite the average person often assuming these dating methods are absolute, most people have no clue how they actually work. And many assume that these methods somehow measure.
An absolute dating method is just one that gets you a number with a unit in terms of time, right? The difference isn't absolute versus up in the air. It's absolute versus relative. Relative dating is like stratigraphic dating, right? Where we say, this strata comes before this stratum, comes before this stratum. How old are they in terms of years? Stratigraphic dating can't help you with that, really. An absolute dating method just gives you a number and a unit. If it says 300,000 years, no matter how wrong it is, it's still absolute. And this is a common thing I see with creationists. They use the term absolute dating method and they have no clue what it means. No matter if it's right or wrong, it's still an absolute dating method.
All right, Calvin, tell us more.
Time itself. But this isn't so. These types of dating methods are based on measuring certain elements that decay over time, not time itself. And to explain the principles upon which all radiometric dating methods work, before we get into more detail, I'm going to use an analogy of a burning candle to help us understand this better. Let's say we light a 10-inch candle to record how long it takes to burn down, its decay rate. And let's say that the candle burns away at 1 inch per hour.
This is
After
too good.
3 hours, the candle's only 7 inches tall, etc. Now, if we then walk into a room that we've never been in before and see a lit candle that's 5 inches high, we might logically conclude, based on our previous research, that the candle had been burning for 5 hours. After all, we measured the decay rate of the candle at 1 inch per hour and the candle was 10 inches tall to start, so it's a simple case of arithmetic. How could anyone not see how easy it is to tell how much time has passed based on the carefully measured data we'd collected earlier? But if we weren't there to see the candle lit, this conclusion, of course, would be assuming several unprovable things. For example, we don't know that the candle wasn't lit, snuffed out, and then relit sometimes later.
I'm so sorry. John,
Why is that music hurting my ears?
Is it possible for radiometric decay, for radioactive decay, to decay to a certain degree, stop, and then start decaying again?
What I think what he's trying to hint at is a case where the system is reset. Radiometric dates kind of assume a closed system so that you've got your daughter product accumulating and it's not escaping, right? If that daughter product is argon, then you don't have argon releasing from the system. And if you did have an event where all of it got flushed out, like if you heated the rock up again, then that would reset the clock, so to speak. So I think that's what he's...
But that would give you an older age, not a younger one. Like that
would give you a younger age if...
Yes, right, that's right.
Yeah, so if you have a reset of daughter product, because now the clock is effectively reset, right? So that's why we always make it a point to say that a radiometric age is not like the age of the rock itself or the mineral itself. It's an age or an estimate of how much time has passed since the system was closed, right? Since this system reached what we call the closure temperature or closure condition. And for each mineral, that might be a different temperature. For each system, it's a different temperature. That's why we can get a different age for our argon ages of a mineral versus uranium, thorium, helium ages versus the fission track age. These should not agree if that mineral has a cooling history, if it has a metamorphic history, and so forth. So we already have considered, it's not like scientists have never thought about, oh my gosh, did somebody blow out and relight the candle on the other side of the door? Like, I've never thought about that before. Of course, this has thoroughly been thought of and described in every book on radiometric dating that you can read, even before the 70s. Like, it's already there. So he's going to go through and talk about how in his analogy, we just can't assume these things to be true. And I'll try and make this point proactively, that an assumption in radiometric dating does not mean that you just take a guess at what the value should be or the condition should be, and you assume it was true and you never find any reason to check that. Like, we use this term assume colloquially as so I had just assumed that you had already completed this task, but I guess that was wrong. I mean, that's just a guess. In science, an assumption is not just a guess. It's a condition that, we put in this value to the formula to calculate it. But then we go back and find independently, how do we, how can we check this, right? That assumption could have been wrong. And if it was wrong, we need to find some other way to test that. And I'm being very vague here. I apologize for that. I'll encourage you again, if you'd like more information, I'll cover this in this video series on radiometric dating that will come out over the next few weeks. But depending on the system, we may go back and use a proxy to determine, like, okay, how much daughter product was present. In uranium lead dating, we use the 204 isotope of lead to find out by proxy how much lead was present at time 0. right? We can use the Concordia curve to determine if there was lead lost, meaning if somebody blew out the candle and relit it, this is the geochemical pattern that we would expect. We would find our points plotting along this line if we do a scatter plot of two isotopic ratios. So we've thought about how to check these assumptions, how to validate them, how to measure by proxy what those values were. We've gone through all this for decades. Like, it's inexcusable to present this as though nobody's thought of it, and this undermines everything that we're doing.
John, what do you think of the
double check? Sorry, just to
ahead.
double check, John.
Sure,
what's the name of that channel you'll be unveiling that at soon?
Oh no, it's I mentioned before, it's already, the first part's already on the channel. The @Age of Rocks is the YouTube channel name. Not a lot of content there, but I'll go through some basic geology stuff, responses to young Earth creationism, and also climate science, because that's a big aspect of what I do.
Okay.
I was gonna say I literally just checked it out.
Rocks. I can't wait to check out @Age of Rocks soon.
You're gonna have to appear as a guest on all of our channels.
Everybody should go to @Age of Rocks. I just pulled it up. He has 89 subs and 12 videos, so it's a new channel. It's criminally undersubbed.
Rookie numbers. Everyone here go sub.
Go sub right now. Age of Rocks.
What is 10 times?
Age of Rocks.
Couple his sub count by the time the
stream. But no, I appreciate you, John, and I think people really should sub to your channel. And I did want to ask you quickly, what do you think of this overall candle analogy? Like, if you were going to use it in a non-twisty kind of way, just as a basic thing, would you ever consider an analogy like this useful?
It's useful for the first 5 minutes of the lecture when you say what we're measuring is a process that occurs at a known rate over time, and we end up with an observation here, for example, how much candle is left. That would be a reasonable point of departure for the rest of the discussion. Like, okay, well, how do we apply this when we're talking about radioactive carbon in the atmosphere, right? So if we wanted to know how big that candle was to start with, then how do we do that in nature, right? If we want to know whether the rate has changed, the rate of burning has changed over time, how are we going to check that with our data? And there are answers to those questions, but it requires you to move on from this simple analogy to the individual system, right?
Great. Yeah.
I mean, maybe you could consider it like these are Birdie Bot's 10-inch candles. They always burn at 1 inch an hour. They always do that, no matter how many you light. Mm-hmm. But he also has some 1/2 inch an hour candles. So you got to see what they're made of before you can estimate.
Yeah.
Well, let's watch the rest of this, and then if you guys want, I'll tell you how you would attack this from a cross-examination perspective.
So real quick,
or we can just move on.
There is one minor point that I do want to make here, which is that this is something I bring up a lot of times in my videos. Assumptions in the context of science are not just things that we think sound good. They're almost always the conclusions of previous science. So when you decide, hey, I'm going to calculate the force delivered to the planet by an asteroid falling from some certain height in the solar system, right? You get to assume the force of gravity and the gravitational constant, not because you don't know what they are and you're just making it up, but because other people already figured it out, and you don't have to start at square one of physics every time you do a physics problem. The same thing happens with chemistry, radiometric dating, all this stuff. We don't assume these things because they sound nice. We assume them because previous studies have demonstrated that these are valid things to think about the world. And if that becomes something that is obviously not the case, then we can stop assuming that thing.
So it's not just that, but like those assumptions, and Joel alluded to this earlier, there's a great section on it in a book called The Bible, Rocks, and Time by Young and Steerley, I think it's over on my shelf. But they go over like these assumptions, which this whole idea of assumptions was originally put forward by a creationist called named Woodmerab. He's popping up again. I think it was Woodmerab. But basically the idea is like, they assume that there's a certain amount of daughter product. They assume that they assume that it starts all parent. Then they assume that it ends all daughter. Then they assume that the rate is always the same. And then there's a fourth assumption that isn't coming to mind. But those assumptions, again, as Joel alluded to, can be checked, right? Like as Dapper said, they're assumptions for a reason, right? Like they're a good starting point because it's like, 99.99 times when we see a new rock form, like volcanically, the clock starts ticking as it starts to cool, and it starts all parent and no daughter, and then the clock starts to tick, and you can start to measure this decay. But we have diagnostic criteria to tell when those assumptions are not warranted. And when you're doing these types of dating, like oftentimes the assumptions will be checked well before you start writing up your manuscript. So to answer, to put it into terms of this like candle analogy, right? There are means to tell by which if the candle has been blown out in the middle and then restarted. If we have a camera in the room, we can go and see if someone came in and blew it out and then lit it again 5 minutes later or whatever. Like these kinds of criteria exist in geology, and creationists never talk about them. They never bring them up. And the reason is because they ruin the entire argument. But
the reason is you have to go beyond a candle analogy. Like I would ask, how do you apply an isochron method to a burning candle?
I was thinking the same thing earlier. Like, you take a bunch of samples.
Well, like I haven't done carbon dating or any radiometric dating in the lab, but I have run like fossil samples through a mass spectrometer to look at isotopes, and we had to jump through so many hoops to like check for contamination and quadruple check for contamination. So many methods we had to go through painstakingly slowly. Like it took us several weeks to go through a couple ounces of material.
Yeah,
because you have to be that careful.
You do. All right, I'm gonna let him continue.
Maybe just a few minutes before we walked in. We don't know that the environment was the same as the one we made our calculation in either. For example, maybe the window was open in this room, and the wind caused the candle to burn at a faster rate than the environment we measured in where the windows were sealed. We don't even know that this candle wasn't 20 inches tall when it started. Our 5-hour guess,
how much wind does it require to alter the rate of nuclear decay? Because I feel like there isn't an amount of wind.
So straight up, I love that. I love that example because Bible Rocks in Time goes through this again. If you're out there and you want nice support for the ancient age of the earth, it's really a critical text. I use it all the time, as with Grand Canyon Monument to an Ancient Earth, because they're both written from the perspective of like geologists who are sympathetic and sometimes even religious themselves. So they're coming at it from a standpoint where they're like, look, we're just looking at the data and seeing what it says. And in the case of this idea that you might be able to speed up nuclear decay, they have this wonderful section where they talk about how it is so difficult to speed up nuclear decay to 0.5% that the energy needed, right, to get it to speed up to the levels that creationists require would itself vaporize the earth, right? Like the level, whether you're talking about electromagnetism or heat or what have you, it's not tenable. The most we've ever been able to speed up radioactive decay is 0.5%. At least when that book was written, it was 0.5%. That's the last to my understanding. And it was throwing everything in the kitchen sink at it. We know that it is incredibly difficult to change the rate of radioactive decay. Sometimes they'll point to this rhenium-osmium experiment. I think it's rhenium-osmium from a couple of years ago, where they managed to reduce the half-life by like, I don't know, something absurd, like 1,000,000-fold or something like that. And the way that they did it is they literally stripped the electrons off of the elements that they were looking at. I'm probably misphrasing it because I'm drinking on an empty stomach. But
I think that's what they did. Yeah,
that's right.
The point stands, right? Like, so yes, when you like alter the structure of the atomic particle, it's going to change it. Okay, how are you going to do that to every single unstable parent during the flood? What kind of mechanism is going to pull the electrons from all of these?
But I would say too, like even like heat problem aside and nuclear physics aside, like we have basic geochemical methods to determine too whether or not those rates have changed significantly in the past.
That's good to know.
Yeah, and a lot of creationists assume this general accelerated decay. The only way that I've been able to figure out how to make that happen seems to be fundamentally altering like the forces of the nuclear force, like the strong and weak nuclear force.
Right.
But the problem is, if you did that, then currently stable isotopes would no longer be stable, and we should see evidence of otherwise unknown decay chains. Right? We should see a depletion in these isotopes that would be stable only because of the current value of the nuclear forces, which would become unstable. And we don't see any of that either. So there's no physical mechanism. Even if you say, well, maybe God changed the laws of physics. Well, not in a way that would matter for this, because we also don't see the evidence because that's also something predictable. Sorry,
Yeah,
guys.
I'd like
Also,
to
if I may
mention too,
shout it
whenever this-
out, I have an old video, or well, just really quick, I have an old video now where I went over like how radiometric dating and a lot of different dating methods for rock layers worked. It was fun to put together, but I think it's pretty old now.
Sorry, John, did you say that there is independent evidence that demonstrates that accelerated nuclear decay could not and did not occur?
I did say that, and we would use like independent decay chains within a given mineral to test that assumption, because each of these decay chains, each of these decay pairs have their own decay rates. And so if that rate changed in any one of them, it would have to change proportionally, like on a logarithmic scale, proportionally in all of those different isotope pairs for those data to make sense. And so we have like internal checks that like all of them would have to be completely out of whack. Just put
Okay,
it
but
that way.
that doesn't disprove accelerated nuclear decay in general for the entire Earth. The heat problem
In
does
the
that, but there
samples,
isn't another method.
yeah, in the samples that we can measure, that you can test that, right? You can test whether it changed substantively in the past. Another thing that, like, which is interesting, usually this accelerated decay is brought up to explain old ages, in the hundreds of millions of years over the geologic column, but we could just focus on the Pleistocene and the Holocene. Like, just look at Quaternary geology, which, from a flood geology perspective, this is stuff that happened since the flood, right? Over the last 4,500 years, in their opinion. You have millions of years, or at least hundreds of thousands of years of decay and evidence of that in stuff that, like, should have, from their opinion, is like 4,500 years old, right? So this is not all stuff that, like, happened during the flood year, during creation week or something like that. We have millions of years worth of decay product in stuff that should be very, very recent in their timeline, right? And so those decay rates would have to be completely different just 3,000-4,000 years ago.
All right, I'm letting him talk.
Logically concluded, would have assumed to know three specific things. 1, the starting amount of the substance, 10 inches tall. 2, the original conditions, no open windows, etc. And 3, that the decay rate was constant, 1 inch per hour throughout the entire life of the candle. And although analogous, this method of assuming the age of something by knowing the current decay rate of a certain element and measuring the amount of that element within a given sample is how all these radiometric dating methods work. Now, one can simply assert that we shouldn't question the assumptions behind these dating methods and take them at face value. However, there's good reason not to trust them blindly. Namely, because they can
I agree
often
with him
give
here. There's good reason not to trust them blindly. We should not just assume at face value that they're true. And we don't. That's simply put. I'm sorry.
No, I love it, John. I love when you're difficult to piss off, so it's funny when it makes you mad enough to speak up.
It's also like similar to the point about evolutionary dating methods being, sort of a misleading title. In the same sense, he's doing that here, where he's going, well, there may be good reason to not completely trust them blindly, right? Well, your title said they were a complete lie. So it's, there's a big difference between something you shouldn't trust blindly versus a complete lie.
No, that's a really good point, actually. Because, I mean, you can see this for yourself, right? Like, if you go to AIG Canada or just Answers in Genesis, their, like, general YouTube channel, the titles are all that clickbait, hyperbole, nonsense to get people to click on it. And then the video itself is sometimes more measured. But, yeah, I mean, you're totally right. He's done a 180 here, a partial,
Yeah.
Like, yeah, actually, sometimes you can trust it. It's just going to be radiocarbon dating exclusively in less than 6,000 years. I don't know how he's going to spin that, but let's see.
Also,
let's find out.
I do have to check really quick. Did everyone on the panel remember to breathe today? because apparently we have to remind people to do.
I was gonna say I have not actually
things.
remembered to. I think it happened, but I can't actually remember to breathe today.
Nah, that thing's on a checklist right in front of my I'm always checking. All right, here he goes.
Possible results. And how can this be? Well, let me explain a little bit more about C14 dating. Firstly, I've found that many people are surprised to learn that carbon dating does not generally work directly on sedimentary, that's fossil-bearing, rocks. Carbon dating only works on things that were once alive, while the other radiometric dating methods can generally only be used on igneous, once molten rocks.
Neither of that is true, by the way.
When creatures are alive.
None of that is?
Neither of those points are true.
I was actually getting ready to ask, because I think one of the main points he's going to make is that when you carbon date dinosaur bone, you get carbon, but you're not dating bone, you're dating rock when you do that. You're applying carbon 14 dating methods to a rock, which he just said you couldn't do.
Yeah, I mean, we use radiocarbon dating on all kinds of stuff that was never alive, including gases, including water, including carbonate rocks, including skeletons of coral. Those aren't actually alive. We use it on speleothems. And as far as like radiometric dating on only igneous rocks, that's not true either. I only date not igneous stuff. I only date sedimentary and secondary minerals that form like at room temperature or colder.
So, okay, at risk of starting a tangent, how do you do that? How do you go about doing that?
I'm sorry, how do we go about doing what?
Yeah, at risk of going on a tangent, I'm curious, because I feel like that's a pretty consistent adage for radiometric dating, where it's like, oh yeah, radiometric dating is typically done on these igneous rocks. So how do you do it on metamorphic or sedimentary?
Well, it's the same concept. Like what the age you get is how long it's been since the system became closed. And I specifically work with calcites and carbonates, so I'll use that, but it's not exclusive to this. We can radiometrically date sulfates, for example, from the Mediterranean to get to date halite formations. Not just halite, but because they have calcium sulfate mixed in, gypsum formations to date when the Mediterranean was drying up. We can date carbonate cements that formed as rocks cracked, and you get water that flows through and it forms calcite as a cement in the cracks that are formed, like in the veins of the rock. Right, so you might pick up a rock where you see it looks like white lines running through it. This is where carbonate minerals have precipitated in those cracks. And so we can look at, say, cracks running this way and date them using uranium-lead method, and cracks running this way and date them using the uranium-lead method. And we actually get two different results because the ages correspond to when those cracks were filled in with material. So when the rock was deforming in this way and when the rock was deforming in that way. This works on sedimentary systems. We even have like rhenium osmium as a dating method for really, really old sedimentary strata, like going back to the Proterozoic, for example, and that works fine. We have cosmogenic methods and exposure dating to date sediments, like glacial sediments. We can do that. How long have these sediments been, how long since these sediments were exposed to sunlight? That's the age that we're getting. Right. So it's
do you ever do stuff with detrital zircons out of curiosity? That's my personal favorite method. Okay. Yeah, one of my professors in college, she did a lot of publications on detrital zircons, so they fascinated me.
All right, Calvin, tell us more.
They absorb C14. However, once an organism dies, radiocarbon slowly decays to nitrogen-14 without being replenished. So the ratio of carbon-14 atoms to regular carbon atoms will decrease over time. Now, if you know the decay rate and the amount of carbon-14 and the number of nitrogen-14 atoms in a sample, you can then attempt to determine its age. The rate of this decay is what geologists attempt to determine and use to date samples containing C14, using the assumptions mentioned previously. And any organic material thought of as older than 100,000 years should contain no significant amount of C14 because the carbon should have decayed away by then. But this has been shown false according to the evolutionary timeline on several occasions. as C14 has been detected in samples thought to have been millions of years old, hence the impossible results I mentioned earlier. For example, dates of around 20,000 years have been given to wood samples from the Marlstone rock bed in southern England, but they're found in layers thought to be 189 million years old. And diamonds, thought to be 1 to 3 billion years old by evolutionists, have given C14 results 10 times over the detection limit.
That specific study, I know the one he's citing. That's the one I've lost sleep fighting with T-Rock about.
Oh, with the blanks? Where they were using it
yes.
for... yeah, I know the one you're talking about as well.
Can I just say, I don't want to go into a lot of detail here, but the very, very short version of this, if you radiocarbon date any material of any age, you will always get a finite age. It's impossible to determine that this sample has 0 radiocarbon in it. You would never be able to do that. Right? You always get an actual age for the sample. That's just how radiocarbon dating works. What you're trying to detect are 14C atoms that are in the sample, but there's always some background signal that you're going to get, which can include 14C atoms from contaminant atmosphere that's in your chamber. You can get a 13C bonded to a hydrogen atom that's usually that's not going to show up as a radiocarbon atom, but it is possible once in a while it happens. There are electrical signals and all kinds of stuff that interferes with this that will always give you some measurement, right? So the point of radiocarbon dating diamonds is to figure out how to tear the scale. That's the analogy that I like to use. The problem is with radiocarbon is you can't, if you're measuring the weight of something, the first thing you want to do is tear the scale so you know what 0 looks like. You can't do that with a mass spectrometer to figure out what 0 radiocarbon is. So you use a material like a diamond to show you to tear the scale. You measure the diamond, that which you know doesn't have any radiocarbon in it, and you say whatever value we get, that's what 0 is equal to, right?
So I recall. Oh, I'm so sorry, John. I've interrupted.
No, that's okay. I was just going this idea that it's 10 times above the background level. That's absolute nonsense. The value that you get is the background level. And the background that he's talking about is for some type of what I can't remember now how it's phrased, some kind of methane gas that they use, process gas. So you would not use methane gas background to determine what the background should be for diamonds, and you would not use the background for diamonds to determine what it should be for carbonates or any other kind of material. The background is different for every material. So we use diamonds to calibrate pure carbon samples. We use coal or graphite to calibrate those pure carbon or old organic samples. We use carbonate standards to calibrate the background for carbonate materials that we want to date. Like that's just how it works. But you're always going to get a finite age. It's impossible not to.
Yeah, I mean, there have been so many write-ups done on the diamonds claim. It's crazy. You've probably done them yourself, John. But then there's one as well with I'm 99% sure it was the example that he just gave with the wood in England, but I think there's another one that's very similar that Snelling pushed, Andrew Snelling, a young Earth creationist geologist, pushed from Australia. But I reckon that the situation is pretty analogous. Essentially, you have this difference in the date of the wood, the petrified wood, inside much older rock, not because the wood is one age and the rock is the other, but because the type of rock that the wood is found in is just latticed with these small microfractures, and water percolates down through these fractures and reintroduces carbon to these samples. So the fact that he gave a date to it and it was around 50,000 years, which is nearing the limit, like that's close to what you get when there's like El Zilcho carbon in a sample, is extremely telling. That is a telltale sign that what's going on is this is reintroduced carbon by means of water percolating down or cosmic rays, this, that, or the other thing, right?
I would kind of skip ahead here really quick, just because if you don't know, or for those who don't know, I live in Austria, so for me it's after midnight.
Oh my God!
And I'm going to have to go quite soon. He's going to talk about that petrified wood that's in rock that was dated to be much older than that. So okay, the potassium argon age is going to be millions of years old, but the Yeah, the wood itself is supposedly only 40,000 years. Like, can you go to that slide where he's got the age of the wood?
Yes, sure can.
Because I have those data in front of me that he reported, like the age data. And
here, hold on,
if you recall, like years ago, Ken Ham did a debate, so to speak, with Bill Nye. And this was one of the points that Ken Ham brought up, that Bill Nye didn't know how to respond to it, like, because he'd never heard of this. And I did write an article specifically about this. I had to go up and look at those original radiocarbon ages. And this is just completely nonsense that they could list this as 44 to 45,000 years old. They sent several samples to 2 different labs, right? And one lab told them this is indistinguishable from background. This is essentially an infinite age, right? That was the one lab in Massachusetts gave them that. So according to one lab, this was not 45,000 years old. It very well may have been 45 million years old. They can't tell the difference because it was indistinguishable from their background. The other lab did give an age of 44,500 for one of the samples and 37.8 thousand years for another, both of them with very high error bars. But think about that. These ages are like more than 5,000 years difference, which means the radiocarbon level measured in one was more than essentially double or more than double the radiocarbon amount measured in another. And when your ages differ by that much, that's a good indication that whatever is causing the radiocarbon signal to be there, it's not carbon that was intrinsic to your sample itself. You're not measuring the same thing. You're measuring like how much contamination you have in one piece of the sample versus another. Those values should not vary by that much. They should be repeatable. If they're not repeatable, that's how you know it's a bad age, right? The other thing is, this is petrified wood, which was described as like being thoroughly permineralized. And so any carbon that is present in that, it's not from the organism itself. It's not from the tree. This is from anything else that's been in, in the environment since then. And this environment was like in a coal seam, in a drill core, like exposed to modern groundwater, modern atmosphere carried down by that groundwater, modern organics that were on the surface, in a highly porous material, where it could have lodged in many places. And the steps that we use to treat contamination, like to wash off the sample to make sure you don't get it mixed in, those don't address stuff that would have like flowed into something like a permineralized piece of petrified wood. We don't take any steps to remove that. We want to date that, like that's part of the inner sample. So that's the long story short with this example here.
No, that's perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. I mean, I've heard that as an example before. Like I've heard the explanation of like the, as I just said, like the water percolating down, but I didn't know about those error bars, and I certainly didn't know about this specific case. So that is extremely helpful, John. Let's see here. If there's anything else even worth...
I think this is a really good example of something I'm constantly complaining about, which is their desire to make the conversation about something I consider like a graduate school level topic in a very particular subfield. Like if somebody just said that to me, even as somebody with a PhD in biology, especially because they'd want to come at a biologist with this because it's anti-evolution or whatever, right? Like I would have no idea how to respond to the issue of the dating of the tree in the stone, because I'm a biologist. It's like not part of my training. And I even imagine, John, if you didn't have maybe an interest in this topic, it might not even been in your topic, right? Because we don't tend to teach modern
I could
grad
run this
students
by
this
1,000 different geologists, and I guarantee like 900 of them would not know the best way to respond to this. It's not going to be a radar.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say, I guess I kind of have an odd perspective on this, because with paleontology, you basically have to double major. So,
well, it's
like I'm not a master's student or a PhD student, but like you have to learn a lot about biology, geology, isotopes, just so much to do paleo.
It's one of those things where like they rely entirely on no one double checking. This is shown to be the case time and time and time again. pick any of their articles, dig into it. It's going to take you at least 3 hours because that's how this kind of thing works. And usually it's extremely difficult to find the sources. If he hadn't put those sources on the screen earlier on to find out that they were from the 1970s, it would have taken me at least 15 minutes to track them all down. And most of them would be non-accessible, sometimes not even through interlibrary loan at your university library. You know, I mean, that's happened to me before. So they rely on no one checking and just taking them at their word. And by and large, it seems like that works out quite well for them, which is why it's
well, implicitly, what is this? It's an appeal to authority argument, right?
Yeah.
You want to say that, like, you know, they're appealing constantly to authority. They will emphasize credentials whenever they get a chance. This PhD, you know, like it's a very common thread. But they want you to. It's another level of appeal to authority. They don't just want to say, like, this person's such an expert, you have to trust what they say. It's like, no, this person is an expert and this one is an expert, but this one has a biblical worldview and this one does not. So who are you going to trust? Right. And here they are using a very niche topic in a very niche field and using highly technical reasoning and language to give the appearance of authority while at the same time presenting something like, you know, that's why I started off with the culture war topic, right? And he starts talking about feminism. And so that already got you to, like, get on their side, you know, to trust them. And now they're going into these technical details, making it sound like, well, the experts at the university, they can't be trusted. They haven't thought through this very well. They're just, you know, going back to their worldview or something like that. It's very strange. And I have to mention, I know this is kind of random, but I don't even know where I would fall into his category, because I'm like, I got the passport, I left the US, I ended up marrying somebody who was not from the US. Does that make me, I don't know, am I supposed to be, like, in his audience or out of his audience?
I was actually thinking about that when he was saying it, John. I was like, oh my God, like,
I was like, hey, that's me.
That's John. We have one of the boys is in the chat now. Like, with it's just, yeah, no, I mean, like what you say, what you say is true. And I genuinely, it gave me a pause when you said this earlier, John, when you were like, you know, as if no one's ever considered in his candle analogy, like, what if someone blew the candle, like, as if of the tens of thousands of geologists and in adjacent fields, like folks who have come through and considered radiometric dating, no one has ever even considered the fact that, maybe something's influencing the rate at which the candle is burning, or maybe someone blew it out. And how tall was the candle initially? Like, it really is incredibly condescending.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, I guess I'll go. So one thing I do want to say is, Erica, when you mentioned that, you know, all it takes is to double check, and yet it seems like they get away with it. And I think it's because fundamentally their target audience isn't scientists. It's not even each other, the other young earth creationist, you know, people with degrees in the field. Their target audience is explicitly people who do not know the science. That's why they can get away with saying such obviously wrong things and using sources that, once you track them down, obviously do not support the claim that they're making. It's because none of it is for us, really, because we're the type of people who will double check. That's why a decent proportion of us here at one point were young earth creationists, but aren't anymore, because we did that one thing. We checked. And so it's all to do with, just like I was talking about earlier, this isn't about science. This is about their identity. It's about their politics. And the quote-unquote science is just one of the facets that they think they can use to either keep people adhering to the identity they want them to adhere to, or occasionally, and this is less important, but occasionally to get people who already don't know what they're really talking about to adopt that identity.
That's got to be so rare. Like, I feel like I have never even heard of that happening, even anecdotally. But I'm sure there's someone out there who had, like, a very soft position of, like, I'm not a young earth creationist. And then all of a sudden something spurred them to really dig into the Answers in Genesis link catalog and convince them one way or another.
I mean, you could argue that John Sanford, he wasn't always a creationist, but then he converted to Christianity for various reasons, none of which were because of evolution or creation.
Yeah, and I think
he adopted a creationist viewpoint.
And I think more often than not, I mean, they get convinced of the spiritual side of things, and then they're told that there's only one interpretation, and so they're like, okay, well, if I want to keep this good spiritual stuff, I guess I better be a young earth creationist. And it's just completely lost on them how many different ways, how many different people have harmonized these two things, and that's kind of sad. That bums me out.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like, another part of this is just, I feel like, do you know why chain letters are often written so poorly, or like spam emails?
It's like a self-filter.
Yeah, they target people who don't pay attention to that. They won't look into it. They won't double check.
They want the kind of person who doesn't mind the constant spelling and grammar mistakes, because that's the kind of person who's going to spread a chain letter.
Yep.
That's just what's so frustrating about all this, because I do think what they're doing is organized and it has a certain level of sophistication to it. And one of the things I find frustrating myself is my own inability to counter all of the issues that come up even in my field. And it's just too broad. And I almost feel like there needs to be more of a scientific recognition of, I've been starting to think of it as scientific defense. Like, I think of most positive research is like offense. And then sometimes you got to get in here to deal with these people who are trying to sort of take down the field. But there needs to be that recognition that we have to then take on their arguments and sort of go through this double special education. One, we have to figure out what their actually issues are and what is the scientific response to them. And then two, we have to do what Erica's managed to do, which is become incredible at communicating about it to actual human beings. But that's
practice with being a TA has given me too much practice with it. That's all.
Sure. I think that's important to mention, that I think maybe some of our confidence can come from the fact that we have to teach, and teaching experience can certainly help you with science communication. John, I wanted to ask you something before you go, which is, are there any dating techniques that they accept, right? Because part of my criticism here is, even if I'm being charitable and saying there's this special class of evolutionary dating techniques that are just bunk, are there non-evolutionary dating techniques that they actually approve of? Because I think what they want us to do is like not date things and just trust the Bible. Am I wrong about that?
Well, it's kind of funny because they will and have to accept at least radiocarbon dating, as long as your samples are less than 4,000 years old. Still, radiocarbon dating is heavily relied on to get historical and archaeological timelines down, right? And we have radiocarbon dating of materials, say, from the Roman era, from the medieval era, from the biblical era in particular, right? And quite a few articles, constraining the age of the ancient Near East, during the time of the Davidic kingdom and since then, right? So they're quite happy to accept those ages, and then they give you arbitrary reasons why radiocarbon dating should break down on anything that's older than, 4,000 years or so.
I see.
Yeah.
Well,
so it is interesting, though, that they have to and do accept that.
Well, it's for like the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? Because they love being able to use the radiocarbon dating to be like, see, this corroborates the biblical timeline. And it's like, yeah, no shit. The Bible is, in a lot of senses, like, accurate in some of the history that it professes. That's not surprising to anybody, I don't think.
Yes.
But then at the same time, they've got this issue where radiocarbon dating works up to 5 times at least more than what they accept as the existence of the entire universe. And so they're caught between a rock and a hard place. And I've seen some attempt, Dabber, you're gonna have, I don't know, you might remember this, but it was either Snelling or Austin, and it might have been a different one. It might have been someone completely divorced from the concept, who attempted to show how you could get this sort of exponential decrease in atmospheric carbon or something along those lines to give them the radiocarbon dates they want, but also disallow any radiocarbon dates like past 6K being accepted. It's a bizarre chart to look at.
It had to do with like hypothesizing like really weird levels of carbon-14 production in the fairly recent past, and there's a number of problems with it, one of which is just, okay, but how do we get to the current levels of atmospheric 14C, because whoo boy, would that require a whole lot of cosmic rays to happen real fast in
a lot.
rather dangerous ways. And it basically came out to, like, if you ignore the problems with the need to build up the carbon-14 in the first place, and if you ignore the fact that carbon dating correlates well with other things like thermoluminescence and dendrochronology and all this stuff, then you can kind of get the math to work. But it's what happens with a lot of creationism, and also, honestly, a lot of flat Earth. You get a bespoke explanation for a problem, and then no attention to how it actually fits into the wider field that you're talking about, like dating in general with other techniques. Or, I mean, if you're a flat earther, things like, hey, your explanation doesn't explain, say, the seasons, even though it does explain the day and night cycle, and it also doesn't explain storm rotation. And your explanation for storm rotation doesn't explain anything else. And so you get that same problem with creation. So like, oh yeah, if we just do this fancy little math, I can make a chart such that the farther back from 4,000 years you get this exponentially increasing age. And so that's great. If, a 40,000-year-old date, that just means it's pre-flood. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't fit in with anything else.
As you say, it creates innumerable other problems in the most unexpected places. Like what John was just talking about, you can radiocarbon date like speleothems, right? Like, so it's like you've got to account for how that kind of thing happens deep underground or in these hidden away pockets of the earth, or how that impacts as you said, Dapper, you have to completely ignore the implications of corroboration in other dating methods that are independent of radiometric dates. So things like dendrochronology and coral clocks and thermoluminescence, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So they're playing whack-a-mole, and it's just not going to work. But their hope is, again, that you don't check, because if you're not into this kind of thing, you're going to see, oh, okay, well, they have a solution. It doesn't matter what the solution is. It doesn't matter the implications of the solution to all of the other aspects of the model. As long as the solution exists, as long as there's an article on the AIG webpage about it, the matter is settled to a lot of these people.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, it's really easy to come up with a post hoc way to solve any one problem in isolation. That's almost trivially easy, right? You can be almost brain dead, and you can come up with some kind of excuse as long as you can do a little bit of math for why this one thing isn't a problem. But what it's a lot harder to do is to turn that into an actual model for the entire system that is internally consistent. And that's why we get all sorts of internally inconsistent stuff. Like, we'll get like, oh yeah, created heterozygosity and essentially 100% genome function. Also, we'll get genetic entropy from the same person. And if you don't know enough about genetics, you might not realize that these are contradictory ideas. They can't both be true at the same time. And they'll use them anyway. And the same thing happens here, right? They're like, oh yeah, corals can grow super fast under certain circumstances. And like, well, how? You don't actually have an explanation for that. And like, oh yeah, if we just ignore the fact that there would be lethal radiation to get us to the point where we can have modern carbon-14 concentrations, then we can create a graph where it's no problem. Yeah, you can, but it doesn't work. And it's sort of like what R.J. Downard and Jackson Wheat have documented in their book, The Rocks Were There, available on Amazon, not sponsored. Creationists routinely ignore about 90% of the relevant data in any field they bother to talk about.
Oh,
and it's a documented amount. Like there's numbers. You can check the numbers.
I actually think that is, like, in my anecdotal experience, that certainly holds for biological anthropology. Like they will pluck a single species or a single specimen from maybe a third of the species and call it square. And you're just like, oh, okay, but what about all the others? Like, we have to talk about all of this. They have enormous implications for the, the story, as it were, as a whole, for how we understand the data currently. But they, again, like, it's back to that core point. They don't actually care. Nope. They don't actually care. Not really, right? Not past the utility in using young Earth creationism as this, like, bludgeon.
So I'm going to have to say goodbye here.
And John, thank you for being so late.
John, thank you so much. This was awesome.
No, thank you. And thank you all in the chat and such that have followed and interacted as well. Those hours went by really fast. I'm surprised we're all still here and wait. But good luck again, especially Dr. Dinah with the fundraising and field work. Looking forward to
thank you.
Yeah, and I
Thanks,
hope
John.
everybody subscribe to Age of Rocks. John, I've learned a lot from you today, and I'm definitely looking forward to following your content.
Yeah, let's stay in touch. So
yeah, definitely.
See you all soon.
Not to brag, but John and I have already talked plenty. We go way back. He's a superstar. I already knew how cool he was.
If you are a channel member or a patron of mine, you can see a brand new interview that I did with John for a recent video that I uploaded that isn't going to be publicly available for quite a while. So if you want to get some more John talking about dating methods or actually in this case, it's a salt accumulation in the oceans and how that is not a good dating method, I don't know, check that out.
My favorite thing that John does is when you get ready to ask him a question, you're like, so you're really saying that like all this creationist nonsense doesn't work and that it's definitively been tested and blah blah blah, and he'll be like, yes. Like he's just like really like calm about how the response, but it's like so great to hear. I love when he does that.
He was great. Like, I mean, that's kind of one of the reasons that I was like, okay, I want to get some questions out of this guy, because like this is like quippable stuff, right? Like he's like,
Mr. Anderson, I guarantee you could just shoot him an email and be like, hey, can I just like pick your brain for like 4 hours? And he'll be like, yeah, sure. when you want to go.
Well,
so that leaves us
do that.
So this leaves us with a bit of a quandary, folks. So we've got the rest of this video. I'm satisfied with what we've talked about, and my plan is to take this entire stream and like cut it up into some nice digestible chunks, and I can add a little, I can cover the rest of this myself at some other time because it's really just going to be like filler. So I'm very comfortable with switching to another video. So at that point, we switched to another video. I know you're waiting with bated breath to see us cover the rest of that particular video. If it's not evident, we got very little done at each video because every sentence was wrong and it took a long time to go through them and then add in the banter and the fun havery. It was a lot. Now, this video does sort of go over the Mount St. Helens stuff as John was going over there at the end, and I'm pleased to tell you that when I'm currently putting these videos together, John has released his full video, like completely annihilating every creationist Mount St. Helens geology and radiometric dating argument that I've ever seen. So please check that out, link in the description. Please make sure to subscribe to everybody who's in the panel. That would make me oh so very happy. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my gentle and of course very modern heart for being a curious primate and watching this video. And I'll see you real soon next time.